thank you very much. And I'll apologise in advance because this is going to be a little bit of a rambling one. There are some trains at the end, I promise. And it's basically the result of 3 conversations that we've had in the past few weeks. I've probably said before, but we're doing a joint project with Tully House in Carlisle, who have all of Mary's original negatives, we think. And we're doing an audit on that and moving forward on it and beginning to think about what we can do with them when we're finished. But that will be some time off. The other 2 conversations were a couple of what ifs. So we're going to chase those as well, just to see how potentially the valley could have looked quite different. So this is the picture of Mary in her prime. We think this is about 1912 or 13, and she's the central one of the 3 ladies. It was taken by one of the Woodleys, CB, I think. So it would put it around 1912-13, and she's watching the progress of the hunt on the opposite side of the valley. And speaking of valleys, this is the first little wander off that I had. We started out with these postcards when we found them, proving that they were Mary's. And we discovered that not only were they not Mary's pictures, but there was another lady who was also taking pictures and turning them into postcards. And she was from Burton in Kendal, a lady by the name of Mrs. Sutcliffe. And she actually, it's a case of who came first. They both took very similar views. This is quite a nice one, looking up into Miterdale, with the railway running front left-hand corner through to the middle on the right. And what's sort of interesting is the white building, centre frame left, is Longrig Farm, which was at this stage just about to be demolished and replaced with Rig Cottages, which was where Mary lived. And this is Rig Cottages, again taken by Mrs. Sutcliffe. Very soon after they were built, all the granite looks nice and sparkly. And then we have a complementary shot. We have to bring Mary in somewhere, but we think this shot is taken from their bedroom window, and it's looking in the opposite direction. You can still see the gate stoops and everything, and they seem to be manoeuvring one of the wood carts. So Mrs. Sutcliffe took quite a few pictures, was also a friend of the hunt. So you got Will Porter on the left and Tommy Dobson on the right, which dates it pre-1909-10. And a nice little shot of the village at Eskdale Green. What's slightly intriguing, and it doesn't show very clearly on this one, is if you look on the extreme left, the sign for Eskdale Stores is still exactly the same. And this again was taken 1910.
So which way is that looking, Dave? If
That's
you were driving
towards,
through it in your car today?
Yeah, going up the valley. So this is what was the post office, John Porter's thing. So Randall Howe drops down on the right, and Eskdale Stores is still there.
And the little car park just past there, isn't
Yes.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's up behind the cart. So it's basically looking what is now completely wooded, the outward bound. But it does say Eskdale stores, and it's exactly the same now. So a complementary view looking the other way. So now John Porter's post office is on the left, and you can see Randall Howe dropping down. So we'll come off Mrs. Sutcliffe, but it was just intriguing that there were two ladies doing similar things at similar times. I won't put it as a trick question. A lot of people answer the question, what powered the Industrial Revolution? And they always answer steam. And it's wrong. Because what actually powered the Industrial Revolution was water. And this is the first case of it. Fairly simple, very idyllic and all the rest of it. And it's actually very green because this is up above Boot and the water goes back into Willenbeck and then powers the corn mill further down and then powered the fulling mill even further down and then powered Muncaster Mill. Same water. So it was water. And another shot of the bobbin mill. And one of the things everyone assumes, you know, mills ground corn and all the rest of it, which is also true. But once you've got a rotating shaft, you have the basis of industry because you can run several machines from that one shaft. And you can see the belt dropping down. This is actually slightly out of sequence because it's at Sampton Bridge. But the mill in Miterdale provided, the bobbin mill, provided 15 men and boys with work. Just drop back one thing and just point out below the gentleman's feet is a pile of shavings, which becomes relevant. So it employed up to 15 people for a while until the almost inevitable happened and that pile of shavings caught fire. It's still a good picture because you can see the drive shaft running right through and where they would take all the bits off. Excuse me while I just catch up. So that was the first phase, and it was industry. It was the Industrial Revolution. It was just smaller, took a little while to develop. But as I say, if you've got corn mills, fulling mills, bobbin mills, all on this one small river, then you can actually take it much further. And definitely lost the place. Oh yes, it's all right. I'm catching up. We run, I'll just go straight on. We're talking about the River Mite powering 3, 4, 5, 6 small mills. This is the Clyde at New Lanark. And this powered 3 pretty substantial mills or mill buildings. So here you have the Industrial Revolution in action, and we haven't got steam yet. The difference that steam made was location. It was, you could take everything to a more convenient location. And then further on down the line, when everything was powered by electricity, quite often the electricity was produced by steam, which is water again, even through to nuclear. It was water that drove everything. I'm now going to fly back a bit. Excuse me. And this brings us to one of our what ifs in terms of the valley. This is the mine up above Boot. Again, around about 1910, so it was petering out. And the next what if was, what if during the last ice age, the glacier that passed down the valley didn't actually scrape away a very profitable iron ore vein that ran across from Nab Gill, and that's in the 70s, and the vegetation hasn't started to cover even 60 years later. So we could have had a site like that. And right across to the other side of the valley at Gill Falls, that's the bridge you can just see across the Esk. So just imagine that as a belt of really profitable ore. It might well have changed the valley we know today. And about halfway up the hillside, we need someone who's a bit more active than me to go scrabbling and searching. But there are interesting formations which may be natural or possibly may be man-made. We can't be sure from this picture, but it's an unusually clear view of the valley side. I'll then skip on a little bit. So now we're on the south side of the valley, and we're looking across. Spout House Farm is centre frame there, and on the fell side to the left, going towards the edge of frame, you can see the Ravenglass incline just above Fisher Ground, where again in early days there was some quite substantial workings which had to have stopped by the 1880s, and yet even today you can still see the shape of the incline quite clearly running down the fell side. And just go back to a wider view. No, I won't. Yes, I will. So you can see it on the wider view, and then when the sun's in the right place, it pulls it up. So in terms of iron ore, if you imagine from below Spout House through to Boot, and there being quite a lot of deposits, again, the question is how different would the valley have looked? Then we're still on the south side and looking up towards Boot. And in this case, we can see Beckfoot Quarry, which is not a massive hole. It doesn't look a terrible gash in the landscape. And directly behind it, sort of left of frame, but over this first horizon, is Blee Tarn, which is quite a way back. Now, this was the other what if. What if in the 1950s, the trend that had happened through the war, where Beckfoot granite was used almost exclusively to build Royal Ordnance Factory at Drigg to make the concrete. There were several thousand tons went to Drigg to build it. John Lang, or Lang, however you pronounce him, that firm built Royal Ordnance Factory at Sellafield, and again used some of our stuff. The Royal Naval Ammunition Depot at Great Broughton bought some more of our stuff, and they were using it for concrete. So the big what if is, what if Beckfoot granite didn't fail the test for the new nuclear power set up at Calder Hall, but was actually successful and used to build Calder Hall, Windscale, Sellafield. Then this is in 1955. You can see the size of, sorry about the sketch, it's a bit basic. You can see the size of the quarry. You can see what planning permission was there in place at the time. And you can see the possibility of the lease extending quite a long way opposite the Stanley Gill guest house, and right up to Bleetarn and over the fell. That would have made for an interesting quarry, and may have changed the beauty of the valley. As it was, none of those what ifs happened. So we do come back to Mary now, and instead of all this nuclear power and diesels and all the rest of it, we return back to horsepower. So this is Hollostone's farm. So Irton Road station is actually behind. Just vaguely see the fence on that, but nice shot. This is going back into Miterdale and is part of the record that Mary made. When a new tenant farmer came onto a farm, in this case in Miterdale, they had what they called a boon ploughing to help to get him started. So some of the other shots in the sequence feature 3 teams of horses all ploughing, which gives the new tenant farmer a head start on that year, and it was an accepted tradition. Once you've done the ploughing, this shows how long ago it was. That's a seed fiddle, and you basically ran it backwards and forwards and it spun out the seeds, which were then covered over by the pair of horses in the background and covered the seeds up so the birds didn't get to them. Incidentally, that's Rig Cottages again behind. She did tend to modify her locations from where she was living. She did go further afield as well. We're told the style of cart that Towers Hartley is using at Church Farm. It's the bit that goes up above the horse is the equivalent in modern day skips of a greedy board. Because he was going to harvest bracken for bedding, which is relatively light, it means you can get a whole lot more on, and balancing on top of that was no mean feat either. Obviously, the other key thing for the local small economy was sheep, and this is Richardson Sharp, who was a shepherd at Boot. It's looking back across towards Brook House. I think that's, no, Brook House is over to the right of his head. Obviously, apart from the meat, there was the Herdwick wool, which, to be fair to it, was no match for merino because the sheep were very hardy and up on the fell, so it was much coarser. Fine shot of flogs there on the bench, and the slightly uncomfortable looking sheep under his arm. The ladies, apart from stacking the fleeces, would just keep the men fed and watered. Those fleeces that didn't get sent down to Kendal to go into the wool trade, and quite a few of them did by rail. We've all seen the large sacks that were carried away from Irton Road. Some were kept locally, were washed and then put through the mangle and hung up on the line to dry. And then using a Hessian base, the rugs that they made were basically tufted and tied with a knot and produced quite an elegant, comfortable rug that went on the hearth, bearing in mind almost all were stone floors at the time. It would be quite welcome. With different pattern displayed by 3 ladies of the WI. Somebody might identify the legs, but I doubt it. And then we get into harvest time, obviously, and this is serious mechanization for Eskdale in the 1930s. And once again, one of Mary's residences is directly behind the machine. That's the ferns on Randall Howe. And you can see how to fell in the distance. So this machine literally just cut it and spat it out to one side, and then you were back to manual again. And once you'd sorted everything and you wanted to store straw, there weren't a great number of barns around. So the straw had to be thatched. And if you didn't get it right and make it waterproof, then you lost the whole crop. It just rotted away. It seemed to be spending a lot of time in Miterdale. This is Miterdale Farm again, and they're just sending out the potatoes to try and encourage a bit more growth on the ones they're leaving. And obviously, in the run-up to Christmas, not the best outcome for some at least, but at least it proves that jumping up and down onto the gate presumably produced some quite good legs. Then the other obvious local produce was from the sea. These are mussel beds, and to give you a little bit of railway interest, the main line heads off down to Barrow behind, and it also shows how they proved positively that there were all right. Yes, fine. Are you fattening them up for Christmas, Mike? Mike says he has some turkeys in the front yard at the moment.
I wonder if he's got a gate for them to jump off.
Yes, you have to keep them exercised. So the reason that the Ravenglass Roman camp was confirmed was that they basically cut the railway right through it and were tossing aside things that now would be carefully scraped and brushed and whatever. A lot of them ended up in drains, unfortunately, at the time. So this is one of the Fearon brothers, just raking in the mussels. It's a fairly substantial.
He's not got a gate.
Mike says he hasn't got a gate. It's a fairly substantial rake, and it has a net on the back. So you scrape to loosen it and then flip it over and hopefully lift them out with the net. They seem to get a reasonable amount. And of course, ultimately, as often happens in this case, the mussel beds were suddenly banned because somebody noticed that they were in very close proximity to the sewage outlet, which might have explained why the taste was so good, or might not. In the background on the left there are the stakes for the salmon garth. And this was basically a corral that you ended up, as the tide dropped, with a pool with some fish in, and then you just swung the net round it and brought them in with fairly good results. I would imagine the 2 fishermen, again, that's one of the Farron brothers on the right. I'm sure they had a couple of quiet ones, but officially they were supposed to hand them over to Lord Lancaster, who was the man. Now we're looking, back to almost ancient technology again, and this shows how easy it is to load a fairly substantial tree trunk onto a cart. Simple A-frame and a couple of pulleys, and away you go.
What year roughly is this?
This 26, 27.
Gosh.
Yes.
And we've just been given these two pictures recently from a lady in Gospers, and she says they're Mary Fair pictures. I'm much inclined to believe her. We just haven't come across the negatives yet. And there's quite a fun little, well, partly a fun little story behind this. Gentleman on the right is the auctioneer, and his name was William Robinson, and that's his son directly in front of him. The tall bearded man behind the man with the satchel is Mr. Watt, the agent for Lancaster, and the man with the satchel is the clerk, Ronald Thompson. And here he is in action again with Mr. Watt having a sit down on what they're just selling. And there was a regular route around this time, and they were felling at the base of Hardknot Pass, which you can see in the background. So the horses and wagons came up from Drigg every morning, and William Robinson is now walking back, but he would ride on the horses on the way up. And apparently there was an unfortunate incident on a slope where one of the carts ran away, and one of the guys tending the horses actually went under the horses and the cart and didn't come out, well, came out the other end, but not in one piece. And his father, sorry, I'm playing with two machines now. His father, the auctioneer, that's just a close-up of him, actually died very young. I think he was about 40 when he died. So the firm of Mitchells, who were in operation in Cockermouth, took the son under their wing, and he basically learned the trade and ultimately became managing director of Mitchells at Cockermouth, which is still quite a substantial operation. So that's the story behind. This, we think, is them parked up at the garage just below Irton Road station. Do you think?
It could be, wouldn't it?
And you get some idea of the amount of wood they were taking back down. They were taking it down to the railway, in fact, at Drigg, and it was loaded on there. There were 3 horses in the team, if I just go back. And if they came to really steep hills, they would pull an extra horse from the second cart to get the first cart up, and then 2 would go back and bring the cart up. So it was quite a trek. Again, very much pre-mechanization. We do have a horse and cart there, and these are the road menders who are widening Bower Bank corner at the bottom there. So that's the Bower House behind. And this again is in the 20s. And we have other pictures of them laying huge cobbles down and putting straight edges on It really was all manual. So there were vehicles about, and one, if not two, were Chevrolets, which surprised me, not knowing very much about cars. But there were quite a few Chevrolet vans, and I think one of the buses was a Chevrolet. This is just, it begs for the caption, fit as a butcher's dog, doesn't it?
I think Wilson's butchers are still there in everyone as well.
Yes, I think you're right. Yeah.
Mm.
And this is Mason's, the grocers. And they've turned up. They're actually parked on the road end from Irton Road station. So what was a church there is now something similar called Church House, I think. And it's had quite a few mods on it.
The poor fruit and veg when you want to it's that back. You've got proper pneumatic at the front.
We're coming to that.
Yeah.
Hold your horses.
All right, sorry.
That's the side view, and it's quite fun. We discovered that the gentleman on the right, who we knew belonged to Masons, his name is actually Ernest, and we found that out at the Gospels show, which makes going to the show and doing a little display worthwhile. The lady he's serving is, we think, Miss Hill, who was Mary's companion. And in one of the shots, Bert Thompson manages to creep in, but I don't think it's in the shots that I've got. That's not him because he's in uniform. But it does show, A, how much they crammed in, and B, as Stuart has just pointed out, if you have a look at the back wheels, it must have been a bit of a bone shaker.
You won't want any eggs in there.
But equally, it was good for it because you didn't know how heavy your back end was going to be. So you could take, with those wheels, you could take any weight basically.
Yes.
Whereas at the front, you only had the driver, the engine.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
pneumatics at the front was logically fixed on the right.
But, there are quite a few jars stacked on the shelves. And I know they've got stop on the front.
So just in case people at home didn't catch that, because the microphone's not pointing out, we have a transport expert with us this evening from Road Transport World, and Bob was saying that it was quite common practice to have those at the back end of a vehicle because you weren't so susceptible to loading and weight and could pile as much in without worry. Did they do that on buses as well then?
I don't think so to the same extent.
No.
You reckon they had studs as well?
It was probably solid, like a traction engine type.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we have several pictures of Mary's car when she took it over Hardknott. They put the snow chains on first.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. So that was the back end, and this is actually a Fiat bus, and this was the market bus, hence all the baskets on the top. Whether they're taking any produce in or whether just intended to bring them back out. But the baskets may have been made locally. There was a basket maker until fairly recently in Eskdale Green. And we quite like the passenger in the next one. The passenger in the back looks very comfortable. And just proves that farmers have been farmers. You get a little glimpse of the lettering of the Eskdale stores then. I hesitate to suggest there's any possible connection. This is the brig Isabella, and it was the last ship officially to visit Ravenglass in 1914. If I point out that what they're unloading onto the horse and cart went straight onto the fields. It was a ship full of guano from South America. So we'll move quickly on. We thought we'd pop up the coast and see the sort of environment that potentially on the what ifs we could have found ourselves in. Nice little shot of a fisherman setting off from Whitehaven Harbour. And the harbour itself, with the fishing fleet in, there were quite a few local trawlers. And again, quite nicely set up with the swans in the foreground. And this is one of the trawlers setting off. And we can't really blame the photographic process for the fug behind it, as you'll see. This was a clipper called the Elizabeth. And again, you know, I'm heading towards some trains. We've got quite a lot of wagons on the various quaysides, and you'll see on a wider shot that there were a lot of wagons, so a lot of stuff got shifted by rail. This is basically just swinging round, and you have to wonder.
You wouldn't have wanted to swallow the water, would you?
But we're guessing it's the same time because the swans are just
are very
about to
clean
go
though,
over.
aren't they?
Yes. And we know that Ravenglass post-Roman times silted up. This was the dredger and the barge to stop Whitehaven following suit. And this is what I mean by a slightly different landscape, industrial. The candlestick on the left still remains and is still visible. The rest of it has now gone. The candlestick was a vent for methane in the mine, I'm told, because I think it could be lit up. And as it was built in the shape of a candlestick that was on the table in the Lauser household, lighting it up seems particularly appropriate. But
you would never, when you walk up there now on all the nice footpaths, you would never tell any of that had been there.
No. And this literally in the foreground is the beach. So all the spoils have been pipped. This is looking sort of northwards towards the Strand, and quite a few of the buildings were done in the sort of Lauser castle style, if you like. So there were quite a few castellations which were purely fantasy. And then down on the West Strand itself, you've got lots of coal wagons and a couple of the saddle tanks that operated. There is actually a Cumbrian Railways photo that is almost identical. That I could probably mix between them and you wouldn't see any difference at all, except that it was 35 years later. So it stayed the same for quite a long time. And again, with all the yachts in the harbour now, you struggle to imagine.
Is that where the beacon is now?
No,
was that the other side?
The beacon's the other side.
Right, okay.
This is where the wagon way came through, that had the big arch that was dismantled, whose name I've forgotten. Bransty Arch, thank you. And the Grand Hotel would be over there. This is a wide shot looking back again at the harbour And the candlestick is again quite visible there, and the fact that they are literally just dumping the waste onto the beach. And we go in a little bit closer, and you can see all the quays have got wagon loads on. So the railway was actually very important. This is another pit. Apologies. This is Hague Pit at Whitehaven. And then, you know, everyone tells you about how fresh the country air was. Well, bearing in mind that the predominant winds were westerlies, if you're living inland from that, I'm not sure how fresh the air would be. This is up towards Workington and the steelworks. We get a little bit closer. Then, just as a bit of light relief, Mary went up to Maryport to catch them assembling the fair, and the expression on the girl's face right in the middle is just priceless. Sort of looking at longing as the gallopers are assembled. And they even had a very basic roller coaster which went round the big wagon. And again, you can see the normal power at the time. This is quite a poignant photo. Some shoes would be nice.
Is this Maryport?
No, this is actually back into Whitehaven. And we thought we'd contrast that with Muncaster Castle, where the Prince of Wales was staying overnight in 1927. And sorry, went on to Gosforth. So that's is it the Globe?
I think so, yes.
Yes, Globe Hotel. This is 1927. And the gentleman who's sort of talking, well, looking down on him basically, we think is J.B. Wrigley, the High Sheriff, who lived in Gosforth. As you come in from Whitehaven, as you're dropping down the hill and you peel off, there's a bit on the side that was his hall, which is now gone and now buildings and houses. Bearing in mind that a lot of the other lakes have fairly substantial boat traffic, this is, as far as we're aware, the only motorboat that operated on Wastwater. And again, this is late 20s. And it was quite a slick operation. I mean, you know, you obviously had to have a terminal. But it's
definitely Wastwater, because
yes.
you've got Great Gabriel at the end.
Yeah.
And
the streets.
What's so interesting is you've got like that motorboat is the height of technology, and some of the pictures are how you imagine the interwar years, where it's prosperity, land fit for heroes, and then the Workington picture, it's still Victorian.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in Eskdale, it's almost pre-Victorian. And you just don't imagine that.
It's such an area of contrast within, you know, a fairly small range. So there's the long-suffering Miss Hill, to give some human perspective. At least she's not actually carrying the camera gear this time. She usually is. Back up to boot. This is the interior of St. Catherine's Church, and it kind of underlines the problems they had taking photos, particularly indoors, in that you're very susceptible to the light coming in and the contrast in a dark corner. And to actually pull out the detailing is quite good. And then she wandered up to Stanley Gill in 1928, I think, when they had a really bad winter. So this is most of Stanley Gill frozen over. That's a 60-foot drop. So there's a fair amount of ice in there. And this is Gatehouse Town at Eskdale Green, and the local school are at. It must have frozen pretty solid that year.
It don't look to be wrapped up that warm, really.
No. I like the young lad who's not so strong in his pins being pushed around on a chair. It's lovely. And then as we're at Gatehouse, she took some lovely pictures of the Japanese garden at the time. So we'll just wander through those.
It doesn't really like that now,
No,
sadly.
the intention to replace it is nice. I thought I actually had another small waterfall frozen. The reasoning behind our claim that Mary took a nationally important record of a 50-year period in the valley is, how many other people do you know would go to Dalegarth Hall when they knew they were just about to do some refurbishing? And you got those fine Lake District circular chimneys, and 3 of them at least have disappeared. And then go back afterwards when they've done the re-roof and rebuilt the chimneys and it's all looking splendid again. I can't think of other photographers who would do something mundane, but is a record of what was actually happening. So I promised you we'd get to some trains. And once again, the dual advantage that Mary had was that with living in the valley, we haven't just got a load of tourist shops in August. And at this stage, it being fairly early on, she would have been living at the vicarage, which is just opposite Beckford Station. Hence, we have about 12 photos of Beckford Station. This is Devon coming charging down. And I thought I'd throw this in because this is actually an event happening that became an urban myth. So this is 1922, 23, and the crusher's up and running, and they've got overspill, which they were just dumping anywhere. It's a nice double-headed train pulling out of the station. But if you have a look under the big shed, you can see Ella, and you can see a Heywood saloon at the back. It's all right, we get closer.
Okay.
So this was taken, she must have been at this end of the Tippler as she took this photo, and then she must have walked fairly quickly to the other end to take the next picture because it's the back end of this train. So that's the train as it's going out. And now you can see Ella in the Heywood coach and the telltale granite wagons. Now, the urban myth that these 3 or 4 pictures created was that passengers travelled in granite wagons as, you know, sort of a common occurrence. If you actually read Tom Jones, he says there were occasions when the wagons were washed out, but this is the 8th of August 1924, and this was the only time there were ever actually passengers in the granite wagons. But the myth rolls on, and you know, each new generation picks up on it.
The coach is numbered.
Some were,
Right,
yes.
okay.
Yeah.
It was August bank holiday Monday,
Yes.
the beginning of the
Yeah.
of August.
Oh,
Isn't it?
just done it.
Yeah.
As we were saying, she actually travelled a little bit further from Irton Road up to Eskdale Green, and another Heywood wagon, and even through the snow you can see that some of the sleepers aren't up to scratch. But the question on this one is, what is the point lever? Because it's on the wrong side. If I just step forward one, the point lever is just in front of the last saloon there on this side. But there,
It's on the wrong side.
it's on the wrong side. And we tried turning the photo around thinking that, you know, but it doesn't come over onto this side when you turn it around. So another little puzzle that we have to chase.
Someone, it might be a Mike. That's the coach that was finished at Ravenglass.
Oh, right.
Yes.
No, I disagree, because it's still got a Heywood end bar on it. So, oh, it finished. Right. Sorry, I'll read the question.
Yes.
It's the one that we finished, not the one that we built immediately afterwards. Sorry, Mike, you're right. Yeah. This, apart from showing the point lever, actually shows the ICL2 and all the remaining Heywood coaches.
You should have known, Dave. You can tell by the door handles and catches.
One of these days, I'll get Mike to write all this down. Yeah, so assembled in there. Oh, I can't see this sleeping car, because I think the third one on the front is the dining car, and then it's the three that were built at Ravenglass, the one that was finished here, and the basic Heywood that we bought. I'll move on before Mike comes in again. I can't remember why I put this one in. It was one of the postcards that actually kept her living to quite a reasonable style, with the various articles and postcards. And I'm sure I've said before that we have evidence of 2 photos taken within seconds of each other, which ended up as 4 postcards. So she was quite sharp. And this we can tell is 1929, because Esk has got the booster tender on, but the loop hasn't been, or the siding hasn't been turned into a loop. This again is Mary taking photos, and this one, I don't know why she didn't like this one. Maybe the next one was a bit more crowded, but this one didn't make the postcard and the next one did. Incidentally, we can't see the glass coach as a summer house, which ought to be there. So it might make it very early 1928. That's the postcard where there's a few more people milling about. And again, Esk at the power tender.
Stuart, can you just go back a picture, please? There was a gentleman called, yeah, all right, it's the same guy. I'm using my point here, that's no bloody good. The second guy on the left, in the second coach with the pipe,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some moving footage where he appears in it, or some, I mean, I know they often look very similar, but I do recognise him. Just
Yeah. Well, curiously, those 2 pictures of the timber auction The Muncaster estate man looks very similar to that as well. So as you say, the alternatives are everyone looked like that, and there were quite a few people who came back time and time again.
Isn't it might, you know, in the what was the Society's Ratty Archive video that members could buy,
Yes.
one of the bits of footage, I know what Andy's talking about. So was something special going on?
Was it the Pathe one?
It might be.
1928?
Yeah, when you see them all walking across
Yes.
the tracks to get to the train.
Yeah, I haven't revisited it recently.
I'll have a quick look while you're talking on the other screen.
Thank you. Yeah, it was special because Pathe were there, and they were running a light engine with possibly one coach, and the proper train 20 yards behind it, so they could get
She would have taken a picture of that, though.
Well,
Maybe.
there is a picture of a film cameraman almost in this position shooting down, but she's labeled it as Whit Monday 1930, so it's 2 years away.
Right.
But we've never seen footage from 1930.
Right. Okay.
So
Who knows?
it could be a confusion. Yeah, so that's the postcard. Just kind of underlines how sort of solid she was, in that Tommy Dobson, the master of the Eskdale hounds, was over in Langdale when he died, and they took a hearse over to bring him back, and Mary climbed up Hardknot to take the pictures. And again, we know that they're Mary's because we've got the negatives, and this shot has been used and credited to all sorts of different people, but it's definitely Mary's, and it's definitely Tommy winding his way back down. Oh, went the wrong way, sorry. So they carry on down and round, but she may well have left the car just at the bottom of the hill and
did she have a car?
Oh yes, yes, she had a car. And that's Eskdale granite, we're told. So it must have been interesting to carve, and it's Tommy's headstone. We're just doing a little sort of diversion here. There's been quite a lot of comment as to why there aren't very many photos of the railway between 1915 and late 1918 into 19. And this is one of the reasons why, because this is the receiving room at Poplar Hospital, which was connected into the London Hospital. And there were 4 doctors at the London Hospital who were credited with developing radiography in England. So she had quite a link. The bit on the back says, "My den is across the passage," which you can just see on the left. So this isn't Mary, but that's where she was working. So that was 1915 and possibly into 16. And then she moved to Colchester, to the, I can't pronounce it, Brown Barracks, which had a military hospital. And this is a little bit further on. This is 1918 and is the staff photo. And it's 49 inches long. And believe it or not, there are no official records for the Colchester Hospital, despite the fact that it had 643 beds.
Really?
And was taking in people from literally all over the continent. There's a lady who runs the website dedicated to this, and she's doing research and has picked up postcards and things. So when we tentatively said we think our Mary Fair was a radiographer there, she got quite excited because she said we can tell the radiographers because they're the only ones without caps. So there are 4 ladies centre right of frame, and we believe one of them is Mary. We haven't figured out which one. Our personal favourite is the one on the left of frame. But, you know, the lady is continuing research and she's feeding back extra information to us. So basically, that's why there are not so many photos available in that period up to mid-1918. We have a couple that she took in September 1918, which are stereo photos. As usual, she was experimenting. And speaking of experimenting, this is a view from Irton Pike across to the Isle of Man. And this is the Times in 1932. So that's page 18, and the rest of it is on page 19. And she took the shots using infrared film, which triggered a whole debate in the Times. There's different people chipped in, but it does underline she was quite a pioneer. And I've gone quiet because I'm trying to catch up on the notes. Yeah. And we were talking earlier about what if. And the final what if is the most gobsmacking of all. So we'll go straight to it. Look for number 2 and read number 2. So that gives us the question, what if the, is what they're called, executors. What if the executors had actually listened to her and destroyed all the photos and negatives? It beggars belief. We have a theory, which I might as well throw in, and that is that the executors took a decision and handed some of the stuff over to Cumberland and Westmoreland Archaeological and Antiquarian Society in 1955. But we've gone through it all, and there is not a single page of a diary. So we think the compromise they came to was they destroyed the diaries because they were personal, but didn't destroy the rest.
Right.
And you know, we're talking quite a few when we lift in the manuscript letters and notes. That's the other 39 boxes at Tully House that we haven't touched yet.
It's strange, isn't it? After you've documented all that
And done all the
and
research
diligently, and then you order it to be destroyed.
Yeah, we can't get our heads around it even now, and you know, we've seen it a few times now.
Oh, soon before her death was that?
We don't know. I haven't got a dated will. I've only got a section, but maybe I should get back to Carl Library and ask. Yeah, so I know it wasn't very railway oriented, but one of the sort of selling points of the Ratty is the land around it and the views and everything. And it just occurred to us that it could have been so different. And Eskdale could have been another Whitehaven.
No, that's been absolutely fascinating. Was Mary wealthy too? And was she using cutting edge technology?
Yes,
Mhm.
and yes.
Right.
Her father, before he became a vicar, was, I can't remember the description. He was a merchant, but a high-level merchant in Manchester. And then
Mhm.
he went
The boss.
to the, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I was trying to think of what to say there. Quite late in life.
Right. Okay.
So he went off and did that. So at a point where he died and they were still living in the parsonage at Beckford, mother was described as independent means.
Mhm.
And later, in one of the later descriptions, we must get to the 1921 census, but Mary was also of independent means.
Right. Okay.
But when you see, how many of her photos were published and how many articles and things she did,
Mhm.
if she was getting half a guinea for the publication of any photo in the 1920s,
Yeah.
and we know there were probably 200 published in that time. So she had a reasonable income.
Yes.
And that we don't know how much she made on the postcards. We've never been able to find out.
No.
That would be intriguing.
Because it was to have the film and things like that. That was expensive.
Yes. Yeah.
And you're beyond sort of like most school children who brought up in Yorkshire. You all know the Frank Sutcliffe pictures in Whitby where people have moved and things.
Yeah.
This is technology way beyond that, isn't it?
Yeah, because it was surprisingly simple. It was
Yeah.
Kodak
Mhm.
folding camera, but we haven't been able to find out which version it was because she could attach a telephoto lens to it, because we know she's made comment about using a Cook telephoto lens, and so somehow she would attach extra lenses.
And she was managing moving subjects as well.
Yes, yeah, mind you,
Sharply in most cases.
To be fair, she did have a technique of leaving her bag by the line side. And the drivers, if they saw her up ahead, would look out for the bag,
right, okay.
and slow right down past the bag, so that she got a sharp image.
So she was probably quite terrifying as well.
Oh yes,
to get an engine driver to do that.
Oh yes. And the 1925 poster, the famous green one of River Esk, was actually stationary.
Right, okay.
And we know it was stationary because all the passengers are standing up. And for some reason that we've never been able to fathom, ICL1, or rather the crew tractor with the hen coop cab, is at the back of the train. We can't, again, we just can't come up with a reason why it should be. So yeah, they were all very aware, and literally slowed down to get a sharper picture.
Yeah. So the stuff at Tully House will all have public access eventually.
Eventually, yes.
That's the aim. Yeah. And how many more years have we got to go on the project?
Well, thanks to COVID, we've got 5 out of the 26 books completed, and we started about a year before COVID. So it'll take a while yet.
Yeah.
We're only doing 1 day a week.
Jeff's asked, would she have done developing?
She did a couple of bits originally, and then she had her own processor. and I'm trying to think of the guy's name. He was at Chester, and he was a commercial developer, and they seem to have got on very well. She had fairly specific requirements. We've got a couple of notices and sort of mini letters where she says, I want it a rich brown colour, particularly for the postcards.
Mhm.
She liked not your sepia, this was a strong brown colour. And I'm stalling to try and remember the guy's name. But yes, it was an agency. Some of the letters and notes we have say, can you develop this half plate and tweak the clouds? And this is for a postcard. So he did quite a lot of work for her.
He's going to annoy you now, isn't it? Yeah.
Will Rose. It was Will Rose Studios at Chester.
And
One of the return letters, interestingly, was addressed to Dr. Mary Fair,
okay, right.
which still chasing.
And speaking of other famous Lake District connected females, was she in the Beatrix Potter
Oh yes, yeah.
connections?
They- They were both on the Herdwick committee,
Right.
so there was a very strong connection.
Mhm.
And Mrs. Healis, as she was, came over to the Eskdale Fair. We got photos of her at the Eskdale Fair, presumably taken by Mary. So yeah.
That is excellent. Well,
Well-
Sort of obeyed Mary now, haven't you?
Apologies for rambling on. It happens, I'm afraid.
It's really interesting. I found 3 little clips from that 1925 film.
Yeah.
I could try and play if you want to give me
let's have a go.
have control of the horizontal hold.
We'll go to multiple participants can share. So hopefully that'll let you have a go, Andy.
Okay, I'll play. I'm trying to get them both on the screen at the same time. Let's try that. Right, can you see that? Is that the gentleman on the left?
Oh yes.
I'm not sure if he had younger. That was the one that came to mind, or maybe even the one behind him. Not sure now. Old men with white beards and hats on. It's not easy.
The only thing I can tell you is that Spout House Bridge behind. Yes.
Oh. Right, we're at 7 minutes 14. The bit I chose was at 7:49, and I've forgotten who it was now. Yeah, 7:35.
Sorry, man.
Yeah.
Oh, one of them.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to get sued by British Pathe for showing this to you all. Here we go. Any second
now.
Oh, can't even see him now.
Big points.
Cool.
Yeah.
809 is the bit of the place. It kind of ties in with what you've been showing, actually, doesn't it? 809. Look on the left. Letting all that cold air in. I wonder what Mr. Barlow would have said. There you go. Anyway, right. I'm going to see if I can get it to go back to that bit at 7. There was somebody here. It's definitely at 7 minutes and 49 seconds. Perhaps he's got off the train since I've showed it.
We do.
Oh, there he is on the right. I got it. Yeah.
Oh yes.
Mm.
Hang on. 7. I'll try and freeze it. There. Him? Is my pointer moving?
Yes.
Yeah,
it
it could
is.
be. Could be. We have one that you've just reminded me I should dig out, and it's just some passengers at Ravenglass, but there's two lookalikes. There's one guy looks like Michael Williams, Judy Dench's husband, and the other, the Northern Irish Reverend Paisley. And they're both in the same shot. So I really should dig that in, because it looks, you'd swear it was the two of them.
I'm sure that was Michael Portilo.
I've met him, you know.
So is Claire.
Yes.
Claire met him.
It's still not been on that. Yeah,
No.
they've not shown that half of it.
Yeah, Mike, it's at the start of that film that I just showed.
Yeah.
That film.
It's into that amazing, how do we call it? Combined wagon, could we call it? The mail wagon with the lift up lid.
Yes, that's the one, and it has, if you look closely, there's a seat in the front part. So I don't know if it's the remains of the shooting brake or if it was the workman's wagon that came from Duffield. But it's one or the other with the lift up lid, but there was a seat
Yeah,
on
yeah,
the front end of it.
yeah. We have two pictures of them using it as literally a shooting brake, with the big 12 ball. One of them, unfortunately, somebody put a staple through the negative, so it's not the best. Oh, there it is. Yeah. He's a good operator.
He is.
This
He's
southern
quite slick
operator
now, isn't he?
Come on, play. Bloody play. Come on, don't you freeze again. Oh, goodness sake. I've got the counter running, but it's not showing a moving picture.
Yeah, just look how big Jack is compared to the engine. How the
Yeah,
hell he
far
got
away, I think.
No, he really was tall.
Dave, just whilst Andy's trying to do that, just to say thank you very much. It's been excellent just to take us away from the 7-mile strip of fence-to-fence railway and ink in the bigger picture of what's going on or what was going on around us. Just to take you to the water-powered side of things and Miterdale, and to remind people that 2024 will be 50 years since the Ratty Arms opened, and the timber for the bar and everything that you see in there now came from trees in front of the camping coaches that we took up to Longrig with tractor and trailer from Irton Road. And it was all cut there at Longrig and fetched back down by train and carted across the Ratty Arms. And that's probably why a lot of the bar and the timbers all walked, because it was all done in the space of about 9 months.
Yeah,
And
it was still green.
Yeah, and of course the connection there is that the turbine up at Longrig's a Jilks turbine, and of course the connection with Peter Hensman, who was chairman at Jilks.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh,
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, but that was, you know, your water power again.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the trees that were felled, was that the coppice?
Yeah.
Because I think Di Pickup, living opposite, took a couple of pictures as they were being chopped down.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thanks, Trevor.
It's okay. I'll bid you all a good night and thank you again. Excellent.
Yeah. Right. Well, on that slight disappointment of not being able to see what Andy's trying to say, but we know it's there for the future. Well, thank you all for watching. And as Trevor said, it was a fascinating talk this evening. You've made yourself a hard act for the next one day. And we will see you all at some point in November. Some people in the flesh as well, I suspect. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you all again shortly.
Brilliant. Cheers to you and Dave, everyone.
Thanks, Dave, and Stuart.
Very fun. Cheers now.
Night.
See you.
You